Well, welcome to our ocean class. We are going to give a short introduction of what we do and why the water and the ocean are important in our planet. So next, we are so happy to be here and thank you for the invitation. And we are always here if someone needs to raise a hand and make a question, you can interrupt us. Next, we are Daniela. I am Daniela and Loreley, that is my friend. We study the ocean and we are oceanographers. That is our profession. We studied in Argentina in a city called Buenos Aires. Argentina is in the map is marked in the red color. And as we were saying, we are far away and an ocean of distance. We studied in a city that is the main city of the country, that is called Buenos Aires, at University of Buenos Aires. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the water in our planet and why it is important. As you may know, water is everywhere. Next, Lori. Thanks. Water is everywhere. If you see a picture of the planet or a map, you can notice that 70% of the surface of our planet is covered by water. But it is not all the same. As you may know, there are rivers, there are oceans, there are glaciers. So it's water, but it is in different states. The states of matter can be liquid, gas, and solid, and it also applies for water. And as you see in the pictures here, we have, for example, on the right, a picture of a river, the La Plata River, that is in Argentina. And this big amount of water is fresh water that is in liquid state. And on the left of the presentation, you can see that there is a big picture of a glacier that is called Perito Moreno, that is here in Argentina as well. And this is also water, but it is in another state that is solid. It is mostly ice, we can say. And also there is water in the atmosphere. There is water that it is in the air, that it's in a state that is made of gas. But what about the water in nature? Here we have an infographic that shows how the water distributes in our planet. So on the left, what you can see is that mostly the oceans occupy 97% of all the water that we have in the planet, and there is a just little amount that is occupied by fresh water. And if we zoom in that fresh water, and we move to the second column of the image, we can see how it distributes between glaciers and ice caps, and between the groundwater that is below the surface that we live on. And the water that is in rivers or in lakes is the surface water that is also a tiny amount. And if we zoom into that, we can find lakes, rivers, soil moisture, and different types of gases that are in the atmosphere. So as you can see, the water that we drink is fresh, and it's only just 2.5% of all the water that we have in the world. But how it interacts, the water in our planet? Which ones are the ways that it has the water to be like in a river or in a glacier or in the atmosphere? It's all water, but how it moves. So here we can see a picture about the water cycle. The water cycle is the circuit, the way that the water has to go from example, the rivers to the atmosphere through evaporation. And also, if we are a plant and we have water in our leaves, we transpirate So transpiration also goes to the atmosphere, and those water eventually makes the nubes, se me fue la palabra.
Clouds.
Clouds, thank you, sorry. Water in the atmosphere eventually makes clouds, and when the clouds is heavy and it has different condition, it condenses and it makes rain. That it's called precipitation in this diagram. And also rivers have a runoff that goes and flows into the ocean. So it is all connected in this water cycle that mostly is commanded by the ocean, because it is the greatest part of the world where we have water. So okay, that is about the water cycle.
So as Dani just explained, water is not only in the ocean moving as currents, but we also have these interactions and changes of state. But today we are going to just talk about the ocean, the biggest part of water of this cycle. And we want to focus on two properties that are very important, that is temperature and salinity. And they are very important because they can modify density. If you have already heard about density before, you know that density is defined as the mass of a thing. Let's think about a water mass, and it is divided by its volume. If we don't change the mass, we just have this water part. If we change the volume for some reason, density will change, and it will change like its weight. It's not entirely correct, but we can think it as a weight changing. So when does volume change? If we have changes in temperature and if we have changes in salinity. If for some reason the temperature of the water mass is increased, then it will expand and it will increase the volume. And if this part of the formula is increased, we know that density will be smaller. And if that happens, that water mass will be lighter than the water mass around it, and it will lift. The inverse relation is with salinity. If we have an increase of salinity for some reason in nature, we know that it will get denser, okay? So these are the two properties that are playing with density. And this is very important because as we can see now, the density will make the water mass change its place in the whole water column. So let's think why would temperature change and why would salinity change? And we have just two examples to make it clear, but there are more. If we have an ice cap in a continental part somewhere, and in the summer you have a lot of sun radiation coming, you know that part of that ice will melt. And the ice does not contain any salt. So this is like a freshwater input that we have in the water nearby. And as we can think that it will dilute the water, so it will get less saltier. And in that case, the density will change. Another example for water getting warmer, we have, I don't want you to see this right now. Okay, so we have the sun radiation coming, and we know that the mean circulation is related to this radiation balance. We know that most part of it will affect the equator and that the poles are always colder. So we have this heat content from the sun coming that is not uniform in all the earth. So a balance is needed. And the ocean and the atmosphere are responsible of that heat transport. And this is an example, a very simple experiment. It's just a minute and a half, and we wanted to share it with you because this is just water at temperature, a certain temperature, let's say that. And we have a piece of ice with some color, blue color, and in his hand we can see water red that is warmer than the water inside of the basin. So we can think that this ice cube is representing a pole, and that this warm red water will represent the water getting warmer in the equator. And as you can see, the water that's colder than the rest is denser and it goes to the bottom. But the water that is warmer stays in the surface. So you have water going up and water going down. So you need a balance. The water that goes to the bottom will start flowing to the other way, to the equator near the bottom, and the water from the equator will start moving towards the pole. So this is one of the most important characteristics of the ocean. This is that it regulates the climate because it can transport heat from heat places, from warm places to cold places. So temperature and salinity allow us to know more about the ocean currents. And for most of the studies in the oceanographic world, we have learned a lot of, or most of it, of the circulation thanks to these two properties.
Well, just we can go back a bit. I want to just say something from that image. Here the colors are representing the temperature of the water. So here we can see what Lore was explaining before, that in the equator and the tropics, the water is warmer. That is why these red colors are placed there. And if we move to the poles, to the north or to the south pole, we can find these blue colors that are indicating that the water is colder. So this imbalance in heat, that the equator is receiving more heat than the poles, then is balanced by the ocean and the ocean currents in particular. So the ocean is important for climate. That was Lore was explaining, because it moves and it transports the heat, and as the tropics and equator are warmer, the balance is redistributed by the ocean. The ocean makes that some places of the earth are not so cold that they would be if the ocean were not there. There's also another thing that is important in the ocean that is placed in the second point of this presentation, that is that the CO2 that is in the atmosphere, that is increasing because of our activities as humans, eventually ends up in the ocean. The ocean is a place where the CO2 is absorbed and also is stored. So it works like a tool for the climate to make it in balance. And also this CO2 concentration can modify some chemical balance that is occurring inside the water. And this leads sometimes to a change in the pH. So this will make the ocean more acid. That is called the acidification of the ocean. And this has a strong ecological impact in our world.
Okay, and for the end, we wanted just to share a little bit of our work as oceanographers. And mainly we have three types of data that we analyze. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the models. We can simulate the ocean state, and they're a very powerful tool because they allow us to make some predictions of how the ocean will be in the future. It can help us understand how was the ocean in the past, and also to understand how it is now. But we have two sources of data: satellite data and in situ data. They are both very important and they are both necessary. The most realistic data is the in situ data, but this means that we have to get in a boat, go to the ocean and measure. That's why it's called in situ. It's at the place. And here, in the picture of the sun and the boat, we have a CTD, that is an instrument we use to measure temperature, salinity, and depth at a certain point of the water column. This instrument descends in the water column, and as it travels to the bottom, it gives you the measurements of temperature and salinity at the different points. So we can know the temperature and salinity profile, and we can study some properties from that. And it also collects, sometimes you can set it to collect biological variables like pH or oxygen or fluorescence and others. And this is another example of an instrument that we used. In that case, we left in the bottom of the ocean some instruments that were measuring, in this case, they were measuring velocities, ocean currents, for a year. And then we went back and recovered it, and we had a year of data that we could analyze. And then we have satellites that are traveling around Earth every day. And they are very important because they give us a big picture of the ocean variables, like temperature. Some of them measure salinity, and we have also the sea surface height that is related to the ocean currents too. And this is a very powerful tool because, as I was saying, we can see not just one point of measurement like we have with in situ data, but the whole picture of the ocean surface at the same time. And well, thank you for attending. We hope that you find it interesting, and any question you have, you can ask us now, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
I'm here, and again, thank you very much for the presentation. And I can see we have here already first questions in both chats. Okay. Can you see them?
Let me see.
Yes. I read that which oceans you have visited. We're here in this picture, in this photo that is here. We are Lori and I in a vessel, an Argentinian vessel. This was in the southwest Atlantic. It was near from our coast in our continental shelf. That was a field trip that we made together. And I've also made two another cruises that were always from South America to Africa. So I crossed the Atlantic twice. And those ones were my experience, always in the South Atlantic.
What is your favorite?
The Atlantic Ocean.
What is your favorite ocean? There is another question in both chats.
Well, that is a nice question. I think that we are more tend to study the South Atlantic Ocean, but it is not because we live there. It is also because it has a very important role in climate regulation. The Atlantic Ocean is very active in terms of regulating the climate, and this redistribution of heat that we were talking occurs mainly in the Atlantic. That is why I think we tend to see this ocean as our favorite one.
But I wanted to say something about it. We make the classification of different oceans, but still it's all the same water mass that it's interacting all the time. We tend to study in different pieces, like different oceans, but we have to remember that it's all the same. It's just one ocean altogether, that it's not divided by any border, but nature.
So you mean it's like loving only one hand or one leg of a person instead of loving the person itself?
Yes, that's
exactly.
Right. There is another question. When the Southern Ocean was established?
That one is a tricky one because I'm not sure about the answer. I mean, geologically, the ocean, the ocean was only one part. It was, the continents were all together, and I don't remember exactly if Lori, you know, you can say it, when that split it. But in that point, the oceans started to separate in the basins that we know now. Because why we do this is because there are some characteristic of the Atlantic Ocean that makes it what it is. I mean, and those ones are slightly different than ones from the Pacific. So that is why we can separate them. But geologically speaking, I'm not sure about when it happened. But it was,
I don't remember.
don't remember, but it was when the continents started to separate.
I believe there is another one. There are more boats or ships under the sea. What is their destiny? That's an interesting one. I start thinking about pirates, etc.
Afterwards we can give you a link where you can see in live the amount of vessels that are in the ocean, in the surface of the ocean in real time. And there you can see the big amount of vessels that are there, and with different purposes. I mean, some of them are for transportation of products, some of them are for transportation of fuel. But I'm not very sure about what's happening under the sea, because for that's submarines. You need to travel with different conditions, so I'm not really into it, but I can assure that on the surface there are a lot of vessels to travel under the sea. It's curious how these vessels do it, because they have to change their density. They have to make denser. And there are several mechanisms to make that. But that is the main point. You have to change your density to go deeper. And also that is something that the fish can do, because if they want to move to another depth, and if they want to go deeper, mostly they inflate or
yes, they expand.
They expand, sorry. Some part of his body that they can change the density, the volume, so they can play to go in different depths.
And also it's very interesting that the fishing vessels are located at regions that we study very much, that are the frontal regions that are related to nutrients, and this is where most of the species go to find food. So when we study some physical properties, we can see that they agree with some other biological properties, and it is reflected by the fish present in the ocean and also the vessels, the fishing vessels.
No.
I have a question. What do you love most of all, in your work as scientists studying oceans?
I can start. I think that for me, I'm a very curious person, and we don't know too much about the ocean. That is what moves me to know, to study it. I mean, the ocean, as we see, is wide, and it covers most of the earth, and we don't know too much about it. We know mostly what happens in the surface, but not too much in the deeper parts of the ocean. So I think that question mark that the ocean is what makes me know more about it.
I agree with Danny. I think of myself as a curious person, and the ocean is like full of mystery and full of things to discover, and that's what attracted me to this career. And also understanding how the world around us works. I think that's very interesting. Like a doctor understands how the body works, we try to understand how the environment works, and I find it very interesting.
And also another point that is important is that as the ocean has no borders, it is international in a way. We can interact with people from all over the world, and we are talking about the same thing because it involves us in the same.
May I just ask something? By our books, we know that the South Ocean started to establish the area after 60 degrees. Mm-hmm. And it was 20 years ago when we start to use these informations, after 2000. It's by our Serbian book. And also, I think that sea and oceans have special meanings for people who live there next to the water. Sea or ocean doesn't matter. I lived, but my students didn't live in social Yugoslavia time. We have a sea, the Adriatic Sea. Can you believe that still today we call this Adriatic Sea our sea? Although it's not part of Serbia country anymore, it belonged to Italy, Croatia, Montenegro, and Albania, but we still like to remember that we used to have a sea, and this is most beautiful sea in the world. Like your ocean is most beautiful for you. I remember that when I was under the Indian Ocean in the airplane, I was very sad when I saw oil platform just in the middle of Indian Ocean. Do you have some part of your research related to that pollution of oceans?
Sorry, I was not finding the unmute button. There is a part of our studies, our university degree, where we studied how it works, the contamination of the ocean. And there is a case that it's a very iconic case that happened in the Gulf of Mexico some years ago, where there was a spilling of oil because something was not working in an oil platform. And there, as we are not very into what happened chemically in that contamination, in that spill, but what we know is how the ocean moves, and that helps a lot to predict or to have an idea in the future how to mitigate these kind of events that that it happened, because there are a lot of platform oils in different oceans and in different continental shelves. So in that point, it is important to know that an oceanographer is the person who would understand how the ocean moves, and if there is an spill of oil, that that part of the ocean will move with currents, moved by winds, with difference of density. So it is important to know how it works, because then we can protect it from things like that.
I believe one of the answers is in education. Education related to all science, natural science or social science, and our obligation as teachers is very important to understand original characteristic of oceans and water, like you explained when you start with this excellent class. But our work as a people who are leading some industries, some companies, and maybe some of my students or our students in the world will be one of persons who can decide, is it clever to use some salt water for some other purposes? And my conclusion is that education is answer for a lot of things related to the oceans life, and for all of us, of course. Is there any question from my students? I believe they have a lot of questions, and for me, it's better to ask you, not me, at school.
For now, for what I can see in chat, all the questions that were asked were already answered. I believe we have like some more minutes left. So if there is another question, just don't hesitate to ask, either in the Q&A chat or in the regular chat. It's like the possibility to ask the experts.
I just want to add something that most part of the population lives near the coast. I think that it was something like 70 or 80% of the population of the world lives less than 100 kilometers the coast. I mean, near to the coast. So that connection is important to recover, because to live next to the ocean sometimes has a connection with the people connect with it, but sometimes it doesn't. So it is important to, as if you have the opportunity to go to the beach or to go to the shoreline, to take some time to appreciate what it is behind it, and what the ocean means. It is part of a whole world that makes our planet a better place.